and welcome. You have reached the video tutorial series for the book, The Art of the Ukulele. I'm Alan Spencer, and I am delighted that you've taken an interest in this book. We're going to learn a lot today, and let me go ahead and start with talking about myself. I am a seasoned performer, composer, arranger, recording artist, transcribist, historian, you name it, hailing from Central California. And I've been teaching music for over 2 decades at all levels and ages. And if you like what you're seeing now, or if you like the book that you're looking into, you can find all kinds of more stuff at alanspencermusic.com and under the YouTube channel Alan Spencer Music Academy, which you probably already know about because a good chance that's what you're watching it on now. I have a bachelor's and master's degree, both from California State University, Fresno, and have performed in all kinds of ensembles throughout my career, running the gamut from orchestras to indie rock, country, bluegrass, jazz, Latin, rock and roll, garage bands, theater companies, chamber ensembles, and everything in between. And my latest claim to fame, if you want to call it that, would be I actually recorded with world-renowned ukulele extraordinaire Jake Shimibukuro a couple years ago. And that, if you want to check that out, I appear on his album called The Greatest Day. While I have many instruments under my belt, but the main instruments in my arsenal would be ukulele, piano, keyboards, drum set and orchestral percussion, bass, and occasionally, once in a while, a horn here and there. Like I said, I'm very excited that you're looking into this book, The Art of the Ukulele. I'm thrilled to bring it into the world. And this book is a method that I kind of trained my own students on, how to smoothly transition into different techniques, but also to cultivate an experience that is like traveling on a journey. So when you create a song, you are essentially taking someone on a journey with you. And all the stuff that I either learned with my students together doing that or learned along the way, I've now consolidated into this book, which now you can enjoy. So many people in the past have asked me, and I'm sure this is the case with a lot of people who play ukulele, is they say, why'd you pick up this toy is kind of what it looks like. A lot of people say that. And ironically, it's usually followed with, and how do you make it sound so musical? It is true that in many ways ukulele is easier to play than guitar. It only has 4 strings. It's a little smaller. I would say probably playing the chords on it is usually less intense than a guitar, but in other ways too, it is kind of tougher. The neck is thinner, and you need to make some interesting music with only 4 strings now instead of 6. It really is just, taking this instrument in my hands and using these techniques and these little tips and tricks from this book that turn something into, a musical piece, something that sounds really entertaining and a lot of fun. I mentioned in the book that I'm assuming the people who bought the book are buying the book as if it was a pre-internet age, and I tried to explain everything in the book that will get you everything you need just from reading it. But I also wanted to make this video tutorial so that you'll have some more supplemental information. Maybe I can cover or demonstrate stuff that I really can't capture in the pages. And so that's why I'm making this video for you now. Unfortunately, unlike the method books that I learned out of in my youth, usually drum books that I'd be watching the lessons on DVD or the lessons on VHS, and yes, I did say VHS, I am that old. They'd walk you through the lessons, and I kind of knew how to read the author's lessons in the book, so I would usually just forget about the video, but in this case, I would say this video is pretty important. I plan on covering a lot of stuff that I can't mention or that I can't really illustrate very well in the text. So back to when I was talking about ukulele being a toy, and someone asks, why did you decide to play that? And my general response is not a very sophisticated one, but it really is true. I say the ukulele just makes everything sound cooler. I don't know how else to say it. There's an undefinable X factor quality to it that just makes it cool, and especially if you're doing cover tunes. If you're doing a song that a lot of people are familiar with, and you whip it out on the ukulele, there's something about it. I don't know how else to say it. It just makes it cool. And that's what I liked about it. Now, there are already several method books on the ukulele out in the market. I am sure of that. I haven't really looked into every single one out there, but there's a whole bunch out there. And a lot of people have been telling me, make a ukulele method book. And usually it's a musician friend of mine, like, hey, get a book made and make some money. And sure, but I didn't want to just make another method book where you're like, okay, this is the G, this is the C, here's how you read tab, you put your finger here, and then you do a couple little children's songs. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but I figured nobody really wants a guy just reinventing the wheel, throwing another method book out there. And it's usually followed by a chapter of like, okay, now here's how you play chords, and now here's how you do yada, yada, yada. And this book will do a little bit of that too. When I first start off in the first chapters, I'll cover all that briefly, but I'm not really going to focus on that. I'm going to assume that anyone who's taking a look at this book or this video has some knowledge of the basics. You're going to want to be a little bit familiar with reading tab, and you're going to want to have a handful of chords under your belt. But if you have that down, you should be okay. You should be able to employ these techniques and turn a song into something really neat, really entertaining. I'm sure I would have been able to develop a method of my own and presented it in a slightly different way, but all in all, it would have just ended up really kind of focusing on the same fundamentals that all the other method books have, which are really important. Don't get me wrong; those fundamentals are critical. Because there's really only one effective way to do it. You got to do everything in that systematic order, and you guys have that already available for you. So I wanted to give you a book that takes you past the level of reading chords and tab and playing kind of like basic children's songs. Ultimately, the purpose of this book is to teach you how to arrange a piece of music. So, and I suppose the spirit of this book, is arranging lessons that can be applied to the ukulele, although they're really kind of the same. It's the same wisdom that you would apply to any instrument. But I'm going to be talking particularly about the idiosyncrasies and the strumming patterns of this instrument, the humble yet noble ukulele. Now, what you'll find in your ukulele playing career is you'll be playing a lot of songs. You'll be accompanying yourself probably if you're the one singing, or you'll be playing the accompaniment while someone else is singing, but it's mostly going to be songs. If you go on to YouTube or any other online media, you'll see an avalanche of people who are singing songs with their ukuleles, and that's all fine and dandy. I got nothing against people learning songs and having a good time playing the ukulele. However, most of the performances that you'll see online are people that are usually singing a cover tune, and they're strumming the chords, and playing some kind of groove for 2 or 3 minutes, verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, out, the same kind of format. And although I must emphasize I've got nothing against the standard pop tune model, like the one that I was just mentioning, I want to take that standard pop tune and put it on steroids. I want to take that standard pop tune and turn it into a memorable journey for you as the player and also for the listener who's listening to you. This is the art of arranging. So now all of the tunes that you perform, they're not going to be the same kind of, you singing the words over a basic strumming pattern over and over again. You'll have much more ingredients to add to your musical recipe. So let's fire it up and get started. All right, so before we dive into all the techniques and stuff, let's go over some fundamentals because it is important to cover those at least briefly. In this book, we are planning to cover many techniques for turning an ordinary tune into a well-crafted arrangement. Ukulele is a fine instrument, and it has ascended the ladder of recognition in the music industry for years now. If you were like me the first time you saw and heard a ukulele, you might have said, "Oh, how cute." But it's not a guitar, it's not cool like a guitar. Everybody wants to play a guitar, when they take music lessons, or something along those lines. But as I played the ukulele more and more, it really began to grow on me. And there are characteristics of it that truly are cute, but there's also an entire world of amazing ukulele music that a guitar or a piano or a saxophone can't capture. There are often many different paths one can travel to get to a destination, but what you're really doing is a well thought out series of left turns, right turns, forward and backward movements. And even if you're traveling down a windy mountain road, it's just more left turns and right turns, and you're calibrating more and more as you do it. Ukulele arrangements are basically the same. There are many beginning and intermediate and advanced techniques on the ukulele that can take listeners on a wild journey. But when you break it down in simple terms, each hand pretty much has a job to do. Your left hand has, a lot of stuff that it's taking care of. Your right hand has other things that it's taking care of. And the marriage between both of those hands is what ultimately makes the music. Sometime your left hand will be, showcasing like a certain run, melody, or, maybe doing trills or hammers and stuff like that. And your right hand is, for the most part, doing strumming. Sometimes you're going to have a little, banjo-esque style finger roll kind of action. And that's their two roles for the most part. Sometimes they're interwoven and they overlap a little bit, but basically that's the art. And after this chapter, we're going to take a look at each hand in particular and find out what you can do when you put them together. So let's get started. I'm assuming that most people who are reading this book, since we're narrowing our focus down to the art of arranging, the art of the ukulele, or the art of the ukulele song, if you want to think about it that way, are for the most part up to speed when it comes to the musical basics. This book is not going to spend much time on those fundamentals. Many readers will be at or above the level of reading notation, like reading, standard notation or reading tab and chords, and they don't really need to learn the basic stuff. And the skills that we're learning in this book can mostly be applied even if you don't know how to read standard notation or tab. It might just take you a little bit more time. But for example, playing along with a lead sheet is something that you're going to be doing a lot, which is basically just words and chords. So if you have some chords in your bank, in your repertoire, then you should be okay. A lead sheet is something that you're going to be handed a lot in your ukulele playing career, and they're going to hand you a piece of paper, and it's basically your job to turn it into music. All you get are words and chords, and see what you can do with that. If you know how to read music or tab already, then all the more power to you. But if you don't know how to read it, I'll leave a brief explanation in this chapter. It will be a great investment in yourself to look up tutorials and such on YouTube and kind of bone up on these skills, because the sooner you can do that stuff, the sooner you can kind of build your song bank, which is it's where you get a lot of your performance power, is by how many songs that you can access or how many songs that you can create on the spot. If you are already familiar with all the fundamentals, chances are you can skip past this chapter, but it never hurts to hear it again, I suppose, either, so feel free to stick around if you want. Special note, if you already play guitar and have picked up the ukulele, I'm sure you will have been exposed to a lot of the techniques that I'm going to talk about, like hammers and pull-offs and stuff like that. Even so, I still urge you to check it out. The excerpts in this chapter or in the chapters coming up, because there are little details that separate the ukulele from the guitar. Not enough to be a big undertaking for you, but there might be something that comes up that you weren't expecting. The first figure that you see in the book here is kind of a basic rundown of how tab works. So on the top staff, you'll see you have the standard notation. This is what a real musician, would call these notes: G, G sharp, A, B flat, and underneath that is the tab. I always tell my students tab is like the cheater version of reading music, in a good way. It helps you get through the song without having to go through all of the work that it would take to learn how to read standard notation. So you'll see on the tab lines, on standard notation, let me go back for a second. On standard notation, we use 5 lines, which each of those dots on the line identifies a musical note by name, but you don't have to worry about that with tab. Tab has 4 lines because the instrument has 4 strings, so each of those lines represents one of these strings, and if you see a number, all that's doing is telling you which number fret to stick your finger on. So the example that you see right here would be 0, which is an open string, 1, 2, 3, and then when you see the numbers switch to a different line, that means you're going to be switching to a different string, both in the right hand and the left hand. Sorry. I'll just play through the whole thing. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, which again means open, switching strings, open, open, 1. That's how you would play that in tab or in standard notation. The next figure that you're going to see is a very standard chord chart or a chord sheet. It just looks like a piece of paper with a bunch of diagrams on it that show you how to read the chord. And this is the oxygen of all fretted instruments. So ukulele, guitar, banjo, mandolin, whatever. All of those fretted instruments must know your chords. There's no way around it. There's no magic pixie dust that's going to help you circumvent around this issue. I cannot see any possibility at all of being able to play with a group or accompany a singer or accompany yourself if you don't have a pretty solid, familiar relationship with chords. You just have to know how to do it. And the sheet that you see here is not at all an exhaustive list. The number of chords that exist can go into the thousands and even more. But the good news is that most of what you're playing in most songs, and by most I would say probably 90% or more, you're not going to need to know maybe more than 15 or 20 chords, which doesn't take too long to learn. It might take a month or two to learn how to play them, how to place your finger on it properly, and then also be able to move to them effortlessly and smoothly. It will take a couple months. But of course, eventually you'll want to look into getting into a larger bank of chords to withdraw from, whether it be an app on your phone or whatever medium you choose. The more chords that you have, the cooler sounding music you can make, or the more you can access, the more you can draw out from, will only be more benefit to you. As I mentioned before, most of your ukulele playing days will involve you swimming in mounds and mounds of lead sheets. And for those who don't know what a lead sheet, I'll show you right now what it looks like on the screen. You'll see all the words to the song, and above the words you usually see a chord that's written above the word that you're supposed to switch the chord on, hopefully. I'm going to tell you now, a lot of lead sheets that you see are going to have words and chords, and they're not really placed properly, and you wouldn't know unless you already know the song or you already know where the chord changes. So just be careful, because there's no real official standard system on how lead sheets are to be written. It will vary greatly, and we'll go more into this topic later on when we get into the arranging chapters. So there you go. That's what I can cover on the fundamentals. Let's move on to the next chapter, which is the right hand. I'll see you there.
Whoa, since my baby left me, I find a new place to dwell, and it's down at the end of Lonely Street, and how to break a do da diddly did a ho. I've been so lonely, baby, I've been so lonely. Oh.